With the 2024 Player's Handbook releasing soon and information coming out from content creators who got early access to it, I thought I'd take a look at the 5 most buffed spells from the 2014 version of the game. I'm relying on TreantMonk's videos on rebalanced and changed spells to make this video, so big thank you to him for putting that together for the community. Please check out his takes for a fuller picture of what spells are changing in the 2024 rule set. Links in the description. Anyway, let's start with the 5th most buffed spell in the new Player's Handbook, Ray of Sickness. A first level spell that is universally agreed upon as bad. The 2014 version of the spell required a spell attack and dealt 2d8 poison damage on hit, and then forced a follow-up constitution save. If the target failed that, it was poisoned for 1 round. Now, this is only getting a minor tweak. In the 2024 version, as long as the spell attack hits, the target is poisoned for 1 round. It still deals the same damage, has the same range, and upcasts the same way. But poisoning a target is much easier, and the poison condition is pretty strong for only a first level spell slot, giving disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks. If the 2024 Monster Manual reduces the proportion of creatures that are resistant or immune to poison damage, and immune to the poison condition, this will become an even more tempting spell to pick up. Onto the 4th most buff spell, Magic Weapon. This is also only a very minor change, but it makes this 2nd level spell much more attractive. It still works basically how it did in 2014, use a bonus action to touch a weapon and make it a +1 magic weapon for 1 hour. The big change is that it no longer requires concentration, which has always made this spell basically unusable. The opportunity cost was just too high. Without that, getting a guaranteed +1 to your attack and damage rolls, or giving that to an ally, for 1 hour is quite cheap, just a 2nd level spell slot. Oh, and upcasting at 3rd level now makes it a +2 magic weapon. Before, it required you to upcast with a 4th level spell slot for that. Getting up to +3 still requires a 6th level spell slot or higher, which I still don't think is worth the cost. My big gripe here is that it still only works on a non-magical weapon. So once everyone in your party is equipped with a magic weapon, this spell is effectively worthless. Unless you have a non-magic weapon wielding NPC ally, or your party loses their weapon somehow. I personally think that they could have buffed magic weapon even more, considering that resistance to non-magical weapons is apparently not a thing anymore in the 2024 Monster Manual. I mean, Bless is still better, minus the 1 turn you lose casting it in combat. But anyway, on to number 3, Grasping Vine. A 4th level spell available to druids at level 9 and rangers at level 13, Grasping Vine has always been a bit of a meme. The 2014 version of the spell required concentration to maintain, and allowed you to use a bonus action on each turn for 1 minute to pull a creature up to 20 feet toward the vine if it failed a dexterity save. While I love forced movement effects that encourage tactical thinking and teamwork, even I knew that this spell was not worth expending a 4th level spell slot on. The 2024 version of Grasping Vine introduces some significant buffs. While it still has a 1 minute duration that requires concentration to maintain, its casting range has been doubled from 30 feet to 60 feet. On top of that, the creature is pulled 50% farther than the 2014 version, up to 30 feet toward the vine. And now, instead of forcing a dexterity save, you make a melee spell attack with the vine, and it deals 4d8 bludgeoning damage on hit. Not huge damage, but a very nice buff that makes it much more worth your concentration and your bonus action every round. Oh, and it being a melee spell attack means it joins Thorn Whip as a weird spell capable of knocking enemies out from range. Niche, but neat. But best of all, if the target is huge or smaller, it's also grappled when hit by Grasping Vine. This would be great even with the 2014 version of the grappled condition, but 2024 buffed that, so it's even stronger. Not only is the grappled creature's speed brought to 0, but it now also has disadvantage on attack rolls. So even ranged enemies are highly incentivized to use their action to attempt escaping from the grapple. You can only grapple 1 creature at a time with it, unless you upcast a spell for +1 grapple maximum per slot level. Honestly, I don't think upcasting will be worth it, but even grappling 1 creature you forced out of reach or behind cover or whatever is still very strong. Overall, I love these changes to Grasping Vine. More forced movement, the addition of damage and grappling, and increased range all conspire to make it a very attractive spell for any party that values tactical team play and the use of persistent zone effects like web, spike growth, what have you. I don't know if it will end up being on par with 4th level summons, but I still think it's a compelling spell with the right synergy. My pick for the 2nd most buff spell is Barkskin. This 2nd level spell always had its problems and was rarely worth using. In the 2014 version, it made the minimum AC of a creature you touched 16 for 1 hour, concentration permitting. That wording was always weird. For example, if you normally had 15 AC and had Barkskin cast on you, then you went behind partial cover to get +2 AC, Barkskin took over and your AC was 16 rather than 17. At least that's how some people read the spell. The 2024 version fixed that minor annoyance and much more. Now, it just grants you a flat 17 AC, unless your AC is higher than that, but then why would you cast it? So you get the full bonus AC benefit from cover while it's active on you. And even more importantly, it doesn't require concentration. So much of the Druid and Ranger spell list required concentration, and the opportunity cost of blowing it on Barkskin's mediocre AC buff was too high for it to be worthwhile. But now, getting a +1 or +2 buff or more to your or your ally's AC for a guaranteed hour for just a second level spell slot is much more reasonable. It brings it to line with Mage Armor, with the benefit of being able to use it on an ally and the downsides of a much shorter duration and a higher spell slot expenditure. And as always, it's great for shapeshifting druids who transform into a creature with a poor AC, but now without the worry of it breaking the first time you're attacked. Ultimately, I think the utility of Barkskin will still fall off pretty hard in Tier 3 or even Tier 2 of play, but it's certainly not an automatic F-tier spell like it was in the 2014 version. Oh, and it's a bonus action to cast now. Not that that ever really mattered before. And without a doubt, in my opinion at least, the spell that's getting the biggest buff in the 2024 Player's Handbook is Witch Bolt. Everyone who made their first spellcaster in the last decade and tried out the Palpatine-esque Witch Bolt quickly learned that it sucked. A first level spell with a 30-foot range, it dealt 1d12 lightning damage on hit, and allowed you to repeat that 1d12 damage for an action each round without having to make another attack if the initial attack landed. So long as your concentration wasn't broken and the creature remained in range and didn't move behind total cover, which made it extremely easy for enemies to break. The 2024 version also breaks in these conditions, so that still sucks, but other changes to the spell make it much more worthwhile. It now deals double the damage, 2d12 instead of 1d12, on the initial attack. This alone puts Witch Bolt as the 4th highest damage spell at first level, behind only Guiding Bolt, Chromatic Orb, and Catapult. Inflict Wounds used to be the top of this list, but that's getting nerfed in the 2024 PHB for some reason that I really can't comprehend. On top of that, on subsequent turns, you can use a bonus action, instead of your action, to automatically deal 1d12 lightning damage to the initial target, even if your initial attack missed. This hedge is extremely handy, and a bonus action means you can still cast other spells in the same turn, since you're not burning a spell slot for this, as the new spellcasting rules make clear. Or take a different action if that makes more sense. Oh, and the spell's range is now 60 feet, so it's harder for enemies to break in that way at least. Honestly, I think the Witch Bolt buff is the biggest of the bunch. Like, I think it's actually worth taking now, especially in parties that focus on control and hindering enemies' movement to make it difficult for them to break the spell early. From F tier to A tier, if you ask me. Finally, we can feel the unlimited power that Palpatine enjoyed. So these are my picks for the top 5 most buff spells in the 2024 Player's Handbook. But before I go, I wanted to mention a few quick runners-up. Lesser Restoration got changed to a bonus action, making it much more usable in combat. I always hated that it was basically an out-of-combat exclusive spell, so I'm happy with that small buff. Blindness Deafness got its range quadrupled, which is a pretty significant buff for an already decent spell, and Dark Vision got the range of its effect increased from 60 to 150 feet, which is pretty neat and now makes it worth casting on a creature that already has Dark Vision. Sleep got a big change that's a nerf at levels 1 to 3, but a buff at higher levels. Its range got reduced to 60 feet, it now eats your concentration, and the area effect is much smaller. Only a 5-foot radius instead of a 20-foot. But now it's just a failed wisdom save to incapacitate, rather than based on the target's hit points, followed by a second save on the next round to knock a target unconscious for the rest of the spell's duration. It still breaks on damage or when a creature uses its action to wake up its buddy. Like I said, worse against low HP targets, but much better against higher HP targets. Color Spray got a similar treatment. Anyway, thanks again to TreantMonk for sharing these spell updates. There are links in the description to see his videos on all the other spells that are getting rebalanced in the 2024 Player's Handbook. Speaking personally, spells are my favorite part of D&D, as anyone who's seen my blog will tell you. So this is the thing I was most looking forward to coming out and discussing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on these buff spells. Am I overhyping things? Did I miss something that makes these a bigger buff than I had considered? Or is there another buff spell that outstrips the ones I talked about here? Let me know in the comments. This is D&D Lounge, wishing you the best of luck in your next spellcasting venture.